206.
Mic check, mic check.
Mic check.
Check it out. Check it out.
1, 2.
All right, cool. All right, so what's up, 206? So today we're going to be talking about a topic that often comes up between the three of us. We were thinking when we were thinking about what episode we wanted to release first, we had a bunch of episodes recorded with guests, but then we got some feedback from some friends, and they said it'll be good just to hear the three of us for the first episode so people can kind of get a bit of an idea of what we're just like, the three of us together. So me and Jason met, what was it, back in 2015, I want to say. And me and Tim have known each other since I was in elementary school. And the three of us often find ourselves talking about, again, the topic of relationships. And it was interesting how it happened with me and Jason. I was visiting California. I just got back in the country. I had lived overseas for 1 year. I just got back in the country, and I was going to California to do some volunteer service project over the summer. And Jason was going to be my host. And I was introduced to him like that afternoon. We were at the center getting ready to go out and start the volunteer service stuff. And he came and introduced himself, say, "Hey, yo, what's up? My name is Jason." And he was a stereotypical Californian dude. Rolls up with like I think he had like a Hawaiian t-shirt on, but it was like the open like button one with like a white t-shirt underneath, with the high socks and the Vans on and the sunglasses and a hat and like super long hair. I'm like, all right, and it definitely kind of fit like a stereotypical image in my mind, but I didn't know anything about him. He said, "Yo, what's up? I'm your host. I got to jet out of here, but when we come over to my crib like later, 9 or 10 o'clock, I think you should be there. And then, we can, get to know each other a little bit." I was like, cool. So 9, 10 o'clock rolls around, get to his house, and I'm with another person who Jason's also hosting. And he's just kind of showing us around, letting us know, what the space is like. You're sleeping over here, you're sleeping over there, bathrooms over here, the typical stuff, right? And so the other dude was pretty tired, so he just lumbered upstairs and went to sleep real fast, real quick. So then I was, it was like a flat, and I was going to be sleeping in, I think, did you give me your bed? Like you gave me, oh no, it wasn't, no. I don't know where your bed was, but I was sleeping in the bed. And so I kind of just put myself down on the ground, on the floor and stuff. And I just hop on the bed, and then it was kind of weird. It's like sometimes it's like when you first meet someone, especially like if you're in their place, there's this assumption that maybe there should be a conversation or whatever, but you never really know if the other person's going to do it out of a formality or they actually want to talk to you. And you know me, I always want to talk to people. So like I'm down for a conversation. Like, who is this random guy whose house I'm staying at, right? So I get down in the bed, and I don't know who said what first. I just remember clearly, like you sat down in your chair in the corner and kind of like folded your legs. I'm like, oh, this dude's ready for a combo, right? And I don't know exactly what was initially said at first. All I know is that probably at least 20 minutes into the conversation, we started talking about girls and relationships. And this was maybe like 10:30, 11 o'clock. And then that first night, I had to be up, 6:37. And I ended up going to bed around 5:30, 6. And that was a reoccurring theme every night thereafter until I ended up leaving. But and then with Tim, go ahead.
Quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick before you jump into it, just so people know who are listening, this kind of like summer project that Armand was involved with is through our faith. So it's not uncommon for people to like post up and stay at someone's home for a few weeks or a few months, offering some service to the community or whatever the project for the summer is. So as much as, we're both, Armand and I are both outgoing and people, we're also not necessarily just folks hanging out, randomly in the crib, like, hey, let's get into this all night conversation. Although it isn't uncommon. It's for us, it's like those summer projects and some of those things, it kind of invites these opportunities. And for myself anyway, I grew up like that. So when Armand came through, I almost like saw like myself 10 years younger, because Armand and I have about a 10-year age difference. I'm 10 years older than him. So I saw myself in him, and I was just like, oh yeah. Oh, I remember this. I used to go ham. I stay up all night, have the conversation, jump right back into the day with no sleep, let's roll. And that's how you know the conversation is lively. That's how you know it's meaningful, when you feel energized after rather than drained. And Armand and I have been like that since day one. So I just wanted to add that little caveat to the storyline. But go ahead, jump into that with Tim too.
Yeah, no doubt. No, thanks for dropping the context, dog. And yeah, again, it's not uncommon for us. And in a later episode, we'll get into the faith that me and Jason share and that Tim's familiar with. So whenever we're referencing certain things, you guys will definitely have a better understanding of it once we drop that episode. But yeah, it's definitely not uncommon for people of our faith to travel throughout the United States, but also in the world, and be hosted by people of the same faith. And there's just kind of this already familial like atmosphere and vibe, because it's something that we are partaking and participate in. So it's definitely less weird than some may think. But anyways, and as far as Tim is concerned, like I said, I've known Tim since I was, I think, in the 3rd grade, 4th grade. And once I started getting older, probably I would say around in high school, it became clear to me pretty early on that Tim was one of the few people, men specifically, that I could have the type of conversations surrounding relationships that were fulfilling and not just superficial and trivial and on the surface. And again, while I could engage in those as well, it's nice to have someone who often shares a lot of the same perspectives that you do in regards to certain things and could elaborate and go in depth in them as well. So me and Tim have been doing this since I was about 15, 16. And yeah, it was also a specific situation.
And it made it,
go ahead.
And it made it easier since I was a friend of your big brother, so I was always around regardless, all up in your house, hanging out, just to be there for you to just jump in and entertain whatever me and your older brother was doing. But yes, audience, let me just say real quick, much love, peace, safety, and in good health to every listener in these strenuous times. We appreciate you being here and listening in. And just to add on to what Armand was saying, as far as me and him meeting, huge significance as far as me and his older brother's friendship. Because of that, because we were tight, because we hung out all the time, naturally his younger brother, my co-host Armand, would just take part and jump in and, just follow us everywhere we went. So we grew close over the years through me and his older brother's friendship. His name is Manuel. Give a shout out to Manuel too.
Shout out Manuel for sure.
Shout out
also
to the big
too,
bro.
On that same note, Tim was mentioned too when Armand and I, the first conversation we had within hours was like, oh yeah, my childhood friend back home, Tim and I and my brother, we would have these conversations all day. So I was familiar with Tim that very first interaction with Armand. However, it might have been maybe months or even close to a year or so before Tim and I made the sort of virtual introduction. What was that, Tim? I mean, do you remember how long ago did we start?
That's a good question.
DMC?
And Armand has a good memory with this, but yeah, I'd say a good year. That's a good estimate. Yeah,
it was probably 2016 because I remember there was a specific. No, I was going to say it was probably 2016 because I remember there's a specific period of time where me, Manuel, and Tim would be on the phone, and Manuel is the name of my bigger brother, and I'll reference something like, "Oh yeah, Jason would really love this conversation." And over a period of time, Tim and Manuel started making fun of me, like, "Damn, you're always talking about Jason." I'm like, "Yeah, that's because he's tight, and I'm telling you, like, we should get him on these phone calls." But it'll be kind of hard sometimes, I don't know. I think scheduling was never really working out. But then, like, finally, sometime around 2016, I finally hit him up. I was like, "Yo, Jason, I want you to meet my brother and Tim, who I always talk about too, and I'm just talking to you one-on-one." And then we came on, and he just hopped into one of the calls, and it's been what it's been since then.
Yo, probably why Tim said what he said, been about a year, because it feels like that, like in a sense, like we've been jumping in from the beginning. Time is almost irrelevant. It's like, is it 3, 4 years, 5 years, 1 year?
Right.
It's kind of like we've been doing this level. Like Tim, as soon as Tim and I met virtually, like this, like the way we talk was kind of the way it went, like from the start. Tim is obviously, and you'll learn if you don't know Tim already, someone who's very eloquent, can express himself and listens very well. So, as far as us getting to know each other, very much held the space for me to share. And I hope I did the same for you, Tim. And I feel like, since day one, we jumped into meaningful conversation and have always maintain that. And I think that kind of transcends time and space, doesn't it?
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. Yeah, it's I think I've heard other people say I've provided a presence of comfortability for them upon meeting them and just conversating with them. I come with a huge love for people in general. Definitely a people's person. Definitely a deep conversationalist, and my passion's been surrounding people just in general of all shapes and sizes. So I think when Jason came along, I already anticipated him to be a very cool, eloquent individual. The social circles that we've been fortunate to have, me, my co-host Armand, and his brother, has been very fortunate, very lovely people, very positive individuals. So when Jason came along, I was expecting nothing less than, he fulfilled that anticipation and beyond. So very fortunate and very lucky to be friends to this very day and to be bringing you guys this podcast.
Much appreciated. Thank you for the word, sir. Appreciate you.
So that there's a specific, it actually started out as a joke. Now that I think about it, I think there was a joke that Jason made one day when we were on the phone. And I think the first time he might have said it, I kind of just brushed it off like, oh, that's funny. But then he referenced it again in the conversation we were having. I'm like, wait, bro, are you serious? He's like, yeah, dog. I'm like, I'm 100% serious. And I was like, interesting. And then we went ahead and posted that question. So we have this WhatsApp group. It's called DMC United, and DMC just stands for Deep Meaningful Conversation. And we've had different iterations of the group, but the current one has about 20 members, I think. And I kind of just posted the question that Jason, I thought jokingly, said to me into the group, and it actually turned into a conversation that a lot of people were really interested in. And at first, I didn't think that people would, but I think the reason why the question that Jason posed is interesting and often is interesting and multi-layered, is because it kind of touches on a lot of different things about relationships that it doesn't necessarily seem like it touches on the surface, but once you explore it, it does. And that question is this: should husband and wife sleep in the same bed? And when Jason first said it to me, he didn't pose it exactly like that. He just said, yeah, and I don't really think that husband and wife should sleep in the same bed. I was like, what's wrong with this dude? Like, why not? But again, when he said it the next time, I was like, oh, this dude is like actually serious. He doesn't think the husband and wife should sleep in the same bed. And then we went ahead and explored the conversation. So we've had this conversation, I think, at least 2 or 3 times amongst ourselves and amongst other people as well that I've hopped on the phone and we talked about it with. But we thought it would be nice to go ahead and jump on the podcast and talk about it as well. So I guess I'll just go ahead and give the platform to you, Jason, and you can explain why you initially jokingly made that comment, but actually, what's your actual sentiments and belief behind that thought?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate how you narrated it. Yeah, so the main thought here, and as we are having this conversation about relationships, what's the point of relationships, right? In general. I mean, this is how I think. I think Tim, Armand, you guys relate with me. So I hope some of our listeners relate. Right. Like, how many facets of a relationship? That's one facet. What other facets? We know, obviously, rearing children, families, society continues. We know that's such a key point for relationship. Protection, building up a community. So much more can get done when we work together. Relationships, a facet of that. So how do we really ask our examples of relationship, are my ideas of relationship, is there more? Is there more for me to learn about within this? I have a history of experience. I have a society of experience. What about stuff that might not be so common within that? How might I explore those ideas? So this is a musings of my mind at times. Hence, shout out to my single listeners, all those out there, folks who maybe think too much and don't really act when it comes to relationships. I sometimes think myself out of it before it starts. But I just want to give that shout out. And maybe I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I'm a single man, 37 years old. I walked the planet for a little bit of time, so I ask a lot of questions. I've met a lot of different folks from a lot of different walks in life, different cultures, faith practices, just in general, how people move through the world. So I try to learn and listen. And one thought came up is this idea of comfort and how does one discipline themselves to transcend the comfort of life. And we might ask ourselves, this is a foolish thought. We're Americans, some of us here listening, United States of America, we're taught seek comfort, create jobs that give you money so you can be comfortable, drive a better car to be more comfortable, wear them nicer clothes because it's more comfortable. There's a lot of other narratives within the American way as well, but one is absolutely about comfort. So how do we get out of that comfort zone? And I was just thinking, man, what a simple way. Test it with everyday life stuff. How about sleeping? How about eating? How about engagement in our extracurricular activities? How do I start to think different about it? And how do I maybe just change it up? So I try these things a lot. I experiment in my life on myself a lot. Fasting experiences, how I take in food, journaling, thinking about putting myself in new situations and reflecting on what I'm learning. I do this a lot. This is just, I enjoy that. So one thought was also this idea of so much of our relationship notions is about togetherness and romance and you complete me. And we know some of those things are not only erroneous, outright false, they also just don't hold up. Even if they're short lived for a little while, it's not gonna. So it's got to be deeper things, right? It's got to go deeper than that. So my thought is always like, how then can we just practice going deeper without stimulus, without someone or a situation thrust upon us? You know, how many of us, for the first time, it was COVID-19 came, this pandemic, we were forced to make changes in our life that we never were asked to do before. And then now 6-7 months later, there's been incredible difficulty, incredible suffering. At the same time, there's been incredible learning. And some of those folks I myself can share how I've learned a lot and changed a lot since this pandemic. It wasn't a choice. I had to adapt. What about when we have a choice? So how much more in a relationship, two people coming together consciously, hopefully, what do they want to do? I mean, simple things. You always sleep in the same bed, right? We're partners. Don't we always sleep in the same bed? It's like such an assumption, I think. Maybe not for other people, but for me it was. And I just started to ask myself, do we want to do that? Maybe I would switch that up. Maybe a few times a week we do it different. Maybe 1 week on, 1 week off. Maybe we take turns. We have separate beds. We sleep in each other's bed. What's the point of all these things, right? Anyway, for me, it was all about what do we learn about ourselves? And I don't think we learn a lot about ourselves unless we put ourselves out of the situations that we don't know about. We never tried it. So that's where that whole premise came from. And I like to hold it up for people and maintain it so people can really look at it and, you know, pick it apart if they need to reinforce some other thing that they believe in already, or explore the idea like, oh yeah, that is interesting. And maybe I won't do it as far as sleeping in the same bed with my partner, but I'll do it in another way. Maybe I won't, you know, I'll try it in some other capacity. I'll get out of my comfort zone. So that's where that all starts. That's what we love, at least for me, I love about conversation, deep and meaningful conversation, is to explore the nuances of choices we make. You know, we get a chance to reflect on it with our words here. So this is why I think questioning norms and mores in society through our experience. Let me experience and experiment with this myself. I'm interested in that. That's the kind of way I like to try to explore this stuff. So like I said, I caveated this all in the beginning that I'm a single man. So I don't expect this to be a common thought or someone to entertain this really. If you think this is nonsense, that's beautiful too. It's not for you, that's fine. But for those who are interested, you know, that's why this conversation kind of pursued. And I think it is interesting. And I think that's why people keep bringing it up, is because, yeah, what is the assumption about me getting involved with somebody? And what am I expected to do when I get involved in this relationship? You talked about when and I'm gonna stop on this tangent. I appreciate y'all letting me go off here, start off like this. It's gonna come back to something that we were talking about earlier, which is just in general about communication, you know, and about relationship. And, you know, Armand said he looked up to Tim. He was a big brother for him. He was actually his big brother's friend. It's like, we do look to people and what are they sharing with us? You know what I'm saying? Like, what are our elders or our older siblings sharing with us? And it also comes in the conversation is like kind of like as men, we're men here having this conversation. What influences is that having to this? You know, I'm also an Anglo guy. What influence is that having to this? And I think that's an interesting dialogue. And then, so anyway, I want to pass it over maybe to Tim if you had any thoughts on it, or
Yeah,
Armand.
no, I was listening to you. You said some really good points, especially around exploration around outside of societal norms, and the whole thought of not sleeping with someone you really care about or love, especially in the context of a romantic relationship, especially a marriage. um, I imagine can be quite troublesome to a lot of people. It's an uncomfortable thought to think of for a lot of people. Maybe for a lot out there, it really isn't, since maybe you guys have that living or sleeping arrangement, you know? But I can tell you from my experience, from a lot of the friends I've listened to, it's definitely a unconventional thing for them.
Yeah.
For most, I think it would be indicative of a problem in their relationship. Why aren't you sleeping next to me? Something's wrong with the intimacy. What's going on? And that can just lead to other very disturbing thoughts, that we can, just imagine here. But I think it's very important when we think about the huge cauldron of societal norms that we're following and that we don't challenge. We've known that our long history is filled with groups of people in our society challenging norms that were very destructive, very demeaning, and very life choice inhibiting throughout many decades. And whether we talk about it a lot to a certain degree in our everyday lives, through our everyday routine, relationships are everything. Relationships affect everything. The quality of your relationships definitely determines the quality of your life. And as two partners coming together for such a long time in such close quarters, especially when we talk in our society in terms of secularism, or individualism. A lot of my friends really don't have too many friends or anyone else they interact with every day outside their spouse, except their spouse, you know? So a lot of what goes on in that context between them and their spouse, is just really quite insular. And it can be very hard when you don't have other many people to talk to outside your everyday relationship that can tell you that, oh, it's okay if I'll talk to my partner about this. It's okay if I bring up this to my partner. That's the beauty about community and having, a healthy support structure outside your romantic relationship. You can have people to go to bounce their experiences of their relationships off of you. And you can ask them, hey, look, you know, I thought about sleeping a certain way or in a different room outside my spouse. What do you think that's okay? Is that weird? Is there something wrong with me? Is that a problem? You know,
Right.
if it was just you and your partner, you really have no other context to derive from because it's just you and your partner. So yeah, I mean, I think the concept is very interesting. Like Armand said, we brought it up many times before, just between us and other groups of friends. And each time, I personally just kind of sat on the thought like, man, you know, I can imagine myself in that circumstance if I had talked it out long enough and thoroughly enough with my partner, to let her know that, hey, it's okay. It's fun. It's an experiment. I want to play video games. Can I sleep in the living room tonight? Da 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 da. I imagine such a situation to be okay if there is enough communication between you and the partner. But I guess another curiosity I just float around all the time is just how many of us out there have that sleeping arrangement and it's a very healthy relationship.
Yep.
For
Well
me,
said.
the reason why I
And
was such
communication's key.
a fat oh yeah. So just to let the audience know as well, there's a little bit of lag. We're all three in separate locations, and there's a little bit of lag time between all of our mics. So sometimes if it seems like, there's a bit of delay until one of us responding or seems things are off a bit, that's why. But I just want to say that the reason why it was such a fascinating question to me is because that I found myself doing something that I would like to think I don't normally do, which is kind of blindly just accepting something that is a norm to be the thing that's best or what's healthy. Because I think oftentimes in society we confuse normalcy and healthy, or normalcy and something that's good. Because just because something's normal doesn't mean that it's what's best for you as an individual or for us as a society. And sometimes things that are abnormal can actually be healthier for the society as a whole. And there's plenty of examples that we can get into, but I don't want to get into a tangent. So for me, I was like, man, why did I just like think Jason was like high on cocaine when he said that he thinks husband and wife should sleep in separate beds? I was just like, me and Jason agree on a lot, but I don't know what he's smoking on this one. Like, husband and wife definitely need to sleep in the same bed. And I think it's because I internally and subconsciously already knew that specifically wouldn't work for me, because my primary love language, I see that I have two primary love languages, but one of them is physical touch. And I'm like, I definitely don't think that I would personally like to sleep in a separate bed than my wife, right? But the thing about it, though, and again, why it's such a fascinating question, is that we're just assuming that because it's normal that that's like what should be done. And it's like, but, have we ever sat and thought about it? Like, do we know the history behind? Is it just, because like, is there a history behind it? Is there any particular reason? Because oftentimes there's things that we find as normal, think are normal, and you'll find out the history behind it isn't necessarily because people were sitting around thinking like, oh yeah, this is the best thing for this. It's something completely random, or it's for a completely different reason, but it just turns out it's something that we also follow. So it's like, what if there's someone out there who personally really likes their personal space? It's like they may like physical touch, they may like hand holding, hugging, and being affectionate with their partner, but when they sleep, let's say they're a fussy sleeper, and just whether it's the body warmth of their partner or hearing their partner make noises in their sleep, snoring, whatever, just makes them uncomfortable, and they would actually get a better night's sleep if they were alone, right? And obviously a lot of people have sleep issues, and sleep is vital to your health. And what if that person like really needs to get a good night's sleep in order to function properly throughout the rest of their day, right? And it's like they just go into their marriage like, oh, I'm just going to have to sleep in the bed with my husband, or I'm going to have to sleep in the bed with my wife. And it's like, is that person, would they feel comfortable enough bringing that up to their partner? And that's the beautiful thing, is how would you guys consult about that? If someone brings it up, how would you guys explore that together? And that's, for me specifically, when I think about it, that's I want the type of relationship where we can explore these things together, and we find insight together, and we learn together in the process of us exploring these things. Because I think that it's important that we challenge as many assumptions and preconceived notions about relationships as possible in order to actually see what the entity of you and your partner are together, and not what's preconceived and you guys trying to fit into these preconceived ideas and beliefs about what a relationship looks like. Because one of the biggest things you often see in relationships is miscommunication, not just in your actual day-to-day conversations with one another, whether they be through text or through verbal communication, but just miscommunications in terms of different ideas people had about what is actually happening between the two individuals involved in the relationship. And I think that in the beginning, if you guys can challenge as many assumptions as normal, or explore what relationships actually mean to you for the two of you together, then you'll become much closer of actually realizing, number one, if the person that you're investigating is someone that you actually can see yourself with in the future, or if it's something that's really just not going to work out. Whereas you guys might just be going into it naturally assuming certain things, either that society believes as a whole, or that you just personally believe, but it wasn't necessarily communicated to your partner, and now you guys are operating under different premises. So it's just a really interesting question, and I really like that anyone if this question's ever posed to them theoretically or in real life, like in their relationship, I think the more important thing is how the conversation is conducted, more so than what the ultimate answer is, right? Because it's going to be different. Yeah. I think that I'm not going to put an arbitrary percentage on it. I think most people are going to sleep in a bed together regardless, right? But there might be a few people out there who are actually like, holy shit, I'm glad I just listened to this podcast because I've been wanting to say this to my husband, for the past 5 years. And maybe now he'll listen because these people just start talking about it now. I feel emboldened. I can talk about it. I can bring it up with him. So it's like, how many people out there are actually maybe suffering from this? And again, it's not about husband and wife sleeping from the same bed. It's about how many people out there in society are suffering from preconceived notions and assumptions about relationships that are just taken at face value and adhered to, and then not communicated about, and therefore is causing a problem in the relationship. And I think that's the cool thing, because you can use this about other things in relationships as well. And that's why I'm like, oh yeah, this is actually a pretty interesting question.
Yeah, a lot of things. Life, just life in general, and just putting emphasis and expounding upon, Armand's concept of how what people think is normal isn't necessarily healthy. And a lot of things what people feel is abnormal can actually be healthy. It's an objective way of thinking, right? It's what, generally, scientists, the scientific approach, scientists think take the life, as far as looking at things objectively, looking at patterns and stuff like that. This is a type of thinking that shouldn't be relegated to educational institutions. You don't have to be a student to think this way. You don't have to be a scholar. You don't have to be any of that. It's very healthy if we increase our objective look, especially as it relates to our relationships, because it's fraught with powerful emotions. And as human beings, it's very important for us to use that neocortex and really look at our relationships as a process. It's easy. We take everything for granted in our society, which is really why it's really hard and emotionally uncomfortable to think about our conventional relationships in just any old kind of way. It's really easy to just follow the herd, follow what society taught you, and don't stop to question it. Armand brought up one time, we grew up playing video games, love gaming advertisements on TV, and one of the ones, Armand, you can help me with this one. I think one of the phrases at the end of this advertisement is challenge everything. So how's that? Challenge everything. And that's exactly what we should be doing, not just as it relates to relationships, but things in general. We know that normal or common sense 200 years ago, if you weren't white, you couldn't participate in society. We know X amount of time ago, slavery was, just common sense, and women couldn't vote. It's not enough going forward in future generations to just have a common sense about life. Sure, it's enough to get you through life, but it doesn't teach you accuracy. It doesn't give you the truth of the situation. And we know that life and our situations, especially relationships, is very multifaceted, extremely multifaceted, and is more complex than how we exercise it. So the more we're able to sit down with our partners and be in this space of exploration and discovery, which are also concepts that are just kind of regulated to children and, the younger days and stuff like that. No, it's very important, no matter what age we are, to be in this explorative phase and be open to be comfortable with your partner with it. So, of course, no misunderstandings, take over, but, who knows as partners what you may explore, and sleeping in different rooms every once in a while, or having a different sleeping arrangement. Space and closeness is a balance. There needs to be a balance, and what constitutes as space for one person is definitely different for another.
And I want to say something that you just jogged my memory. Oh, here we
go. Ahead, bro.
Yeah, he just jogged my memory in a couple of things, and I also want to pose a question, because Tim was talking about space and closeness and intimacy. And I think that one thing we definitely do, especially in this hypersexualized society that we live in, we always associate intimacy with physical things, right? But for me, intimacy at its core is a common understanding between two individuals. And to me, that intimacy transcends any other level of intimacy. So for me, it's like there could be a husband and wife that are sleeping in separate beds, but
could be.
whether it's every day or, every other day, whatever schedule they come up with. And to me, that's really intimate if the way they reach that point is through a healthy consultation. And it could be a lot more intimate than two people that are sleeping right next to each other, cuddled up, right? Whether they're happy or not. It's like, I like the fact that the other two people are doing that thing through challenging an assumption and a norm and coming to a conclusion together in unity. And that to me is the ultimate form of intimacy. And it's a beautiful thing. But the other thing I wanted to touch on was, and I think I just had the biggest brain fart in my life. So I'm going to let you talk, Jason, and then I'll get back to the other two thoughts that came to my mind.
Just jump in if your mind gets jogged, dude. Just jump back in.
No doubt.
The thought I was having, just to reiterate a few of the sentiments about communication, right? Because and here we are in the 206 once again. Welcome everyone to the 206. Family, friends alike. Communication. That's what we're doing here, brother. Go ahead, jump in. Communicate with us. What would you remember?
Yeah. Yeah. So it was two things. So when we're talking, it makes me think a lot about, because when you challenge assumptions and norms, it allows for creativity to be nurtured and grown. And creativity in relationships is something that I think is almost non-existent in contemporary relationships, at least the ones that I'm observing. And I think it can be fantastic. And it's like, how creative are we being? I think we're not really creative as a society in general, but like, how creative are we in our relationships, and what new things are we trying? And it's also, I think people think that once you get married, the work is kind of done, but it's not. Your relationship is never static. You have two individuals that are in the relationship, but then you also have the entity of the marriage itself, which is the dynamic between husband and wife. And you have to tend to that, or it's going to become static and die. But the nature of the relationship itself is not static. So I think that even something, again, the original question is something that can serve as a catalyst for growth, and also make things potentially creative. Because for me, I really like it when I'm talking to a girl and she says something that is clearly indicative of the fact that she's been putting her own imprint and impression as far as what relationships are and are not, as opposed to just automatically accepting what relationships look like in society as the norm, and then following those. So I was going to give some examples, but I'm going to go ahead and let you roll with what you were going to say, and I'll bring it back up later.
Well, all right. Well, real quick, Jason? Just jumping in on that note, before you get into the examples, like when we consider, communication, right? Like, so for me, when any of these, how do we ask ourselves questions, right, about life? Oftentimes, as a scientist would do, they observe something, right? We observe life, we ask questions, we investigate. It seems pretty easy enough. However, in society, we're given a certain privilege, which is like trusting people, and we don't know. I mean, we drive across a bridge. I'm not an engineer or an architect. I don't know who's working on those bridges. I didn't do it, but I drive across that bridge with absolute trust that's going to hold me up. So in like manner, I feel like we inherit ideas just trusting like a bridge. It's going to hold us up. But when I'm looking at society, I'm seeing relationships and marriages and everything, they end 50% or higher. The rate of divorce, who knows, that it's not quantified if you're just dating someone. Like how many fast overnight, if you will, or 3-month, 6-month relationships happen in society. I mean, you don't even consider really the depth of trying to even grow close together at times. You're just purely selfish. It's just like two selfish people, meeting each other in the middle for a few weeks or months or whatever it might be, let alone like actual long-term successful relationship in America. It's like the old school generations, maybe a little more common. I don't know, by choice. That might have just been by necessity. We could maybe interview some of our elders and they could tell us about it. I also think jumping into like sleeping in separate beds, I do think at some point, maybe decades ago, that might have been somewhat common in certain part of America. I don't know. I'm thinking I Love Lucy. So maybe that's just TV. There we go, right? We're getting our ideas from messing it all up. But aside from that, going back to the original thought was, that of communication was, how is it, all right, maybe 50% of relationships aren't working because they are communicating, realizing, hey, let's go our separate ways. We're done with this. I think it eventually has to get to a point where you decide to do something. Usually you're going to have to communicate one way or another. The question is it cordial? Is it enlightened? Is it, like you said, Armand, is it creative? Are people like happy getting out of a relationship? Like, oh yeah, this is so great. Here I go. I'm moving on to other greener pastures. And your other partner or whoever you were with is thinking the same thing, and maybe you're mutually supporting each other. I mean, have you ever heard of that at all? It's so uncommon, such a farce of a thought. However, I'm sure it does exist. My point is, though, our society, we're inheriting many of the things, reiterating thoughts that have been shared here. We're inheriting so much hurt and wound. We're inheriting so much trauma. We're inheriting many ideas that if we were to actually let's look at it. Let's observe it. Is this logical? Does it make sense? How does it feel? Do I feel it even? Am I even asking myself what this does, how I experience this? And if we need to make different choices, let's do it. And I think that creative thought is great, right? Because this might not be the conversation we share, like you want to have it all with anybody. This is like foolery. Some people are listening, maybe this is like, oh man, such nonsense. But from the perspective of investigation, let's look at it. Let's just try it. Who cares? Oh yeah, I've done it this way for the past 10 years. But what if I just did it a different way? I'm a right-handed dominant person. I'm going to use my left hand today. What's the harm in that? And again, if I want to judge it doesn't work for me. Don't do it. Everything, bro. The whole day, dog. Like, and I do that kind of stuff because to me it's interesting and it's hard. Like, life isn't just. I mean, it's the same journey I might be having on a day-to-day basis, but when I just do something out of the blue, I have to make an adjustment. So I personally think again, and many of us, blessings to everyone out there, man. COVID-19 came, it really shifted so much of the way we see things. Who made that choice? Did anyone say to themselves, I am going to change once a global pandemic hits, I'll make the adjustments necessary? Like, it happens and we have to adjust. If we don't adjust, we know what happens. We're going to suffer more difficulty will come our way. So I'm just thinking, like, I'm okay with that to a degree. I bring a fair amount of nonsense onto myself. If I'm a little bit aware, I would like to bring less nonsense. So some things I think it's fun to try, and other things are very scary to try. Yet, if we're talking about intimacy, partnership, that's the person ideally you can both explore the fun part and the scary part. Ideally, or have we been taught other things about relationship? I'm a man in America. Was I taught how to be a man in a relationship? Does it work? Do I trust my partner? Can I feel scared around her? Like, share my vulnerability? Could I be so bold as to say, hey, I kind of like sleeping alone a couple times a week. Can you mind? I'll sleep on the floor, dude. It's all good. I just like, you know what I mean? Do I feel comfortable in my own skin? Can I say that to the person I'm sharing a bed with? Like, I really hope levels of communication can happen like that. My sense is that it's not. And that's why something like sleeping in a separate bed, just the mere thought of sharing it as an idea scares people right away. It's absolutely off the table. So to me, actually, in my investigation of people, when I say I'm single for a reason, my mind, I'm probably thinking myself in and out of things before they happen. Yet I do hold value in what I'm thinking about. So I also hold value in then posing it to people. And if I'm going to have a partner, very much so, I'm going to want a partner who could at least have a conversation with me about sleeping in a separate bed. If she right off the bat, or he or whoever it is, right? If your partner is saying, no, that's not for me. To me, that's not about what's on the top. To me, it has to do with the level of trust you have with somebody. Because for me, if I trust you, I'm going to hear you out. I want to listen to your ideas. And especially if you're going to be creative and explorative and you're like, hey, I want to learn this thing. I want to try this thing. Like, cool. Yeah. Like, that's awesome. That's like being, it's like a science experiment. Let's have fun with it. And if it scares me, I'll tell you that. And then we could talk it out. So the communication, key things, right? Going back into it, and observation. What are we seeing in my own self? So for me, when I test these things, it helps me. Now I can move, maybe going into a relationship, moving forward, knowing that I can have this conversation, and then also understanding maybe someone else's perspective. And it's not that this needs to be the thing. It's just one way to explore many conversations, as we've been reiterating.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, bro.
Let me pose this question to you guys, because it hopped into my mind when I'm thinking about how this idea of sleeping in separate beds, husband and wife sleeping in separate beds, partners sleeping in separate beds, is very challenging. So on the same line of thinking in regards to challenges, we know that in our faith, one of the central figures talks about accustoming your children to hardship. And again, in a later podcast, we can get into that conversation. But I'm thinking about it because we know that the trials and tribulations of life are myriad. And we know that the only way that you grow, whether it's physically, emotionally, intellectually, or spiritually, is through stress and through hardship. Same thing as the diamond, right? Put pressure on the coal. Put pressure on the coal, turns into a diamond, right? So with the knowledge that your relationship is going to be tested from forces outside your control, ostensibly forces outside of your control, should you, in preparation for the inevitable test that life shall bring to you and your loved one, should you guys consciously make the decision to accustom your relationship to some level of hardship and preparation for those hardships that you know will inevitably come down the line?
Right.
And if you do, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, at first I thought, I was like, oh yeah. So with that being said, every married couple sleep in separate rooms now, because you never know. You might encounter a situation where, you're forced to sleep in separate rooms for whatever reason. No, but I mean, that applies to so many different unforeseen or predictable or situations that you as a couple can actually prepare for,
Yeah, but think about it like this. Just preparing for tests, right? It's like in class, you know you have tests coming up. You know you're going to have a test September 8th. We're having a test on polynomials, right? So what do? You study. But see, this is a little bit different because obviously it's not a math class. You don't necessarily know what the tests that are coming in the future are going to be, but that doesn't mean that you can't still prepare yourself. And it's like, if you're not preparing yourselves at all, then it's like, what does that really say about how you're going to handle the test when it comes? I mean, devil's advocate can say that, oh, naturally, just being in a relationship, tests, it's almost like meta, like tests are going to come, and those tests are preparation for other tests, right? But again, that's still tests that aren't consciously chosen to happen between the partners together. They're just tests that are inevitably coming. But I think like it's different when you're actually choosing together to go into the test, right? Because now it's a decision made in unity, and it's a decision knowing that we're doing this in preparation for something else. So I think once you encounter the test that comes down the road that was inevitable yet unforeseen, because you couldn't exactly know what specific test would come, it's like you already know that you've prepared with your partner, and I feel like the energy is different, and you're better able to navigate that test when it comes down the line. So that's why I'm big into, and that's why I think creativity comes back into the conversation. It's like, how are you being creative in that sense? Because again, I'm not saying like, oh, accustom yourself to hardship, go fly to an island, and with no with nothing, just yourself, your person, and your your partner, and just like find a way to survive. Obviously, I'm not talking about extremes like that, but can we do little things?
Right.
Can we
Yeah.
wake up a bit earlier than we want to, and I don't know, maybe both people aren't, that active. So let's wake up a little bit earlier than we want to make sure we together get some exercise in, right? That could be something simple. And it's like, it's a challenge, right? You're putting pressure on the relationship because you guys aren't used to it. You guys want to sleep in, and you guys may not be that active, and working out may be foreign to you or new to you. So, but doing that, I think in my eyes is preparation for a future test down the line that has nothing to do with, waking up early or working out. That's just how I see it.
In adding to that is this thought, to me, is the idea of quality, right? So in a way, we're learning about quality and character. Because to me, it's not, same with conversation. To me, I learn about quality and character through conversation. Not it's not one for one, clearly, but I'm trying to listen to where someone's heart's at, right? When they're saying something, including if they're totally frustrated or angry, or they're saying something that really sensitive to me. I really have practiced through many teachers and a lot of experience and trial and error and still in practice of learning to listen to people better and better. Like listen to their intended meaning, not so much get caught up on their words, but like, I mean, it's hard to like, it might sound existential to talk about listen to someone's heart. As human beings, though, part of my belief is that we do have the capacity to hear the hearts, if you will, or another way it might be expressed is just feel someone. You can feel it, like you know where they're coming from. It's not creating an enemy by what we're saying. We're actually on the same team. We just use different words for it. So how do we remind ourselves we're in this together, especially with partnership? And that's what's one of the blessings of this possibility is testing ourselves with simple stuff, like stuff that you're going to do anyway. You're going to sleep anyway. You're going to eat food anyway. Those are great things to test ourselves with. Like, all right, hey, yeah, I'll wake up a little early and maybe not even work out. Just wake up like 5 minutes early. Let me just see if I'm willing to try that. Wake myself up 5 minutes early. I'll go to bed 5 minutes early. I don't know, whatever you want to do, right? The point though is like, my sense is life can be largely influenced by our attitude. The question is, are we creating habits that create an attitude that allow us to experience life the way we want to experience it? And it, like you said, Armand, it doesn't mean we control the future and what we go through and the difficulty of what we go through. All it means is that we're ready to accept life as it happens, as it comes, as we experience it. We are one part of a whole big cosmos. There's so much going on. We're not everything. We're just one part. I accept my role in it and whatever shows up my way. So that attitude can't just show up, I don't think, without being tested and without us actually diligently, focusedly, through discipline and through discomfort, becoming more capable. And that's building the character, that's building quality. And all these things, there's so many ways to do it. So for me, a big part of my willingness when I think about these questions is going to be my attitude. If my attitude goes sour right away, no, I don't want to do it. Okay, Jason, you're scared, bro. You're feeling scared in this moment. Why? Where is it coming from? I don't necessarily have the answers to that in those moments. I try to ask myself in those moments. And like I said, sometimes success, sometimes, I got to learn the hard lesson. So either way, though, I think kind of like trying to maintain an attitude of learning, an attitude of creativity, an attitude of growth. All right, I'll try it. Let me at least, make sure I feel safe. I don't want to be too, when we say out of our comfort zone, we're not talking about, like Armand said, we're not talking about something real dangerous or just small thing. All it takes, just a little shift, just a small shift, just like using your left hand instead of your right hand if you're right dominant, or the reverse. For one activity, hold, try to just write next time, whatever. Anyway, I won't go on more than that. I don't know if Tim, you wanted to jump in on it.
Yeah, I mean, and just so I can share a quote with the audience. A friend of mine not too long ago suggested to me a podcast from a very famous psychotherapist whose name is Esther Perel. She's been doing what she's been doing for 30 plus years and has been on TED Talks, many types of podcasts. She's the author of books out there. And all the knowledge she represents through her studies and research and experiences is invaluable. But one of the things that I think that she's relates to what we're talking about is a quote, and I think I remember it by heart. She says, "Every human being comes into this world straddling two sets of fundamental needs. One set has to do with security, safety, dependability, predictability, sense of belongingness, and continuity. And the other set deals with adventure, mystery, novelty, sense of the unknown, exploration, and discovery. And that not only as we go through life, these needs grow in intensity, or shrink, but that we constantly come out of our histories and experiences with different degrees of this need. And we also have a balancing act to play as we're growing through life as well. We got to be able to balance, adventure with security, togetherness, with space, individuality, love with desire. So to be in a space, right, especially conversational space, where you're able to talk about something that's, say, could be viewed as unconventional, or just different from the societal norm, the standard, can be very much an opportunity to really gain insight into, as Armand says, the creativity, and what it looks like, the intimacy between you and this person, but also as a defense, because a lot of things that happen in our relationships go by without us being just completely unaware of it, because it isn't conventional or normal, again, yet it should be, to look at our relationships as a process, as a very nuanced process, together and by ourselves. We know that a lot of things happen in relationships because one or the other is still following a very old tradition that they normally don't think about. Gender roles, for example. A lot of us tolerate a lot or give up a lot for our partner that we shouldn't, depending on certain situations, but we're unaware of it because this just comes across as normal to us, because this is just all that I've known, and so we always end up pointing or thinking about other causes as to why a relationship is the way it is. For example, sleeping in different beds, but psychologically, we also do things unconsciously to protect ourselves from trauma, right? As we grow in our relationships, whatever. And this switch, for example, some people put themselves in a different identity. It's not something they're conscious of during the trauma or hardship they're going through, but they do it as a way of coping through whatever they're going through. And oftentimes that transfers into a relationship later in life, married one, and the defense mechanism comes up again, and nobody knows what's happening. Nobody knows why he or she's acting this way. But in reality, that very well could be what's happening. And we know in general that a lot of people are afraid to be alone because of the so much anxiety that's in our society. So the length and extent we'll go through, to behave in ways that we normally don't behave, to do things we normally don't do in our relationships, is because of fear, anxiety, financial insecurity, trust is a big thing that many people talk about as it relates to intimacy. I trust you, Tim, so that's why I like laying down with you in the same bed. But we don't bother to ask why. Why do you trust me? Why do I trust you? Why is it that sleeping in the same bed constitutes that trust? Again, we kind of just have this sort of common sense, generalized idea of, what trust, intimacy, and creativity should be like in our society. But how often do we sit back and look at what's the general in a particular, and look at it in such a way that's very strange and familiar? So yeah. I really think that in terms of intimacy, creativity, defense, these are not things that are just nice to talk about, or are very interesting to talk about every now and then. It's very well a fundamental need, according to a lot of experts out there, for sure.
No doubt. So I don't know if you guys had any final thoughts on. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, one final thought, quick, Armand, on that was referencing also some good literature there. I appreciate that, Tim. Also, another piece of literature, if you're interested, anyone out there, some of y'all might know Don Miguel Ruiz, and he had a book that was quite popular, I think, in the United States, called the Four Agreements, and he's got a variety of books. One of his books is called Mastery of Love, and the Four Agreements, Mastery of Love, Don Miguel Ruiz. He's all about taking personal accountability for your life and recognizing that in so doing, our lives can be very wonderful if we take certain accountability. So the Four Agreements talks all about that, and it's worth looking into. I won't get into those. The Mastery of Love, he talks all about love, and it's a fantastic book. Highly recommended from my perspective. For me, it might not be for everybody. So one of the things he mentions in it is this idea. He tells this great story of these two lovers who they hold this glass. They each of these people, they hold a glass, like a lamp, and they move through the world and they protect this lamp. And it's like the heart. And you try to hold your lamp. It's made of glass. You got to make sure, you know, there's wind trying to blow it out. If you drop it, it breaks. All these things, right? So you protect it. You're so scared, like Tim was sharing, like this anxiety, this fear. So you're really holding on to this glass. You don't want it to break. You meet somebody down the road and you connect in a great way. Little by little, you start to build the trust. Fear starts to drop. And you start to question, man, maybe this person could hold my glass for me. This lantern. They could hold it, this precious thing that I've been holding on to so carefully. I'll give it to them and they'll hold it for me too. How much more trust could there be? So there comes a point in the relationship when you give this glass, if you will, this heart, this lantern, you ask someone else to hold it for you. And typically, he talks about it is when that happens, it's like us, we give away the accountability of us taking care of ourselves and treating ourselves in such a way that we can treat others well. Again, like Tim, like you mentioned, like the sacrifices we might make for gender roles or culture or whatever, our faiths. Sometimes those are fantastic sacrifices and sometimes they could be detrimental. So it just depends on looking at it deeper. And this idea of this mastery of love was that if we expect others to fill us up and we expect our lives to be improved because someone else is there, we're entering dangerous ground because now our experience, we're giving our experience to someone else for someone else to create it. And what happens typically, and like he writes in the story, because now you give your glass, this lantern, you holding it, you give it to someone else who has to hold their own. They can't hold two, and eventually one of them gets dropped. Usually someone gets offended, et cetera, et cetera. And if you drop a glass, now you're talking about it's almost irreplaceable. That's why he uses that analogy, because trust is so hard to come by. Once it's broken, you feel like it's like glass. It's shattered in a million pieces. I need a new one. I can't replace it. And although we're not so ornate as you know, our range of capacity as humans is more complex than glass, but it gives indication to sometimes the fragility of our sensitivities in life. And that we get so scared, I've been protecting this so long and I finally had to trust, I thought you'd protect it too and you dropped it, but it was our responsibility from the start. It was my responsibility. I should have never gave it to you. So how do I hold my own self in account while being a partner to somebody, but not taking what they need to do for themselves and making it my responsibility? Because it's not fair to them or to me. But how do I become a supporter of their choices, of their needs? How do I become a friend in exploring that too? They may not know. We may not know. I might not know what I need. I might need someone a little more, willing to ask questions that I'm not asking myself. So there's lots of ways to explore it. I would just say maybe this like kind of full circle is this idea that we come into this planet, we're born of a mother, and we leave this planet in a similar, not in a similar way, but by ourselves is what I was trying to get at. So as wonderful as all our relationships are, and they're very much wonderful and necessary, and we're always connected to the life experience and humanity, whether we acknowledge it to various degrees or not. In like manner, my sense is that connection is going to be there. We have to hold ourselves accountable in relation to the whole. We can't give away. We can't let other people dictate major things in our lives, especially our hearts and how we feel about it. So my final thought in relation to that, as you asked Armand and as I shared this comment, is really, if we haven't already, like going back to what Tim said, if we're afraid to be alone, my suggestion is, and I referenced COVID a few times, when COVID came, it really invited, do the inner work. outside stuff, don't go outside, go inside, stay in, quarantine, inside, do the inner work. My sense is to overcome personal fear or fear of being alone, we have to face it. We have to be alone for a while. So my suggestion and hope also to anyone listening, especially some of the younger folks who are exploring relationship maybe for the first time, spend some time for yourself. Get to know yourself first. Learn to really find out who you are, what you like, what you appreciate about somebody, and including your own self. Know that about you. So when you come into opportunity with somebody, you can be communicative, and also you can have boundaries and know that your boundaries and holding your boundaries are actually to the benefit of the person who's maybe asking you to break them. Hold yourself accountable to yourself is better for everybody, regardless of initial reactions. Because a lot of people might give you a lot of heat for being authentic to yourself. And many of us, we've been there. So spend some time for yourself. And in my sense is the process of relationship unfolds more naturally. That's what I've learned over the years. It's still a work in process. So I just appreciate y'all letting me share some of the words. As always, with the homies, Armand and Tim, it's always a pleasure to be with you, brothers.
For sure.
Blessings to you guys, and blessings to all the listeners and everyone tuning into the 206. And just want to give one final big thanks to, planet Earth, man. Let's treat it well. We only got one planet. We got one body, man. Let's treat it well. Let's treat each other well. We're deserving of it. We're human beings, man. We're in it together. Let's stay together. And I'll pass it to you guys here.
Gaia.
My final.
You remember that was the name of planet Earth from the planet. Sorry, my apologies. The Captain Planet cartoon audience for those who grew up in the 80s and 90s. Gaia.
Captain
Gaia
Planet,
of the Earth.
Great shit.
Yeah, that's a throwback. Yeah, there's definitely an age cutoff for remembering Captain Planet. But some of my final thoughts, I'm just going to echo some sentiments that Tim expressed earlier, and that's this: relationships, whether they're familial, friendly, or intimate, they are the most important things in your life. They're more important than anything else, and the quality of your relationships will determine the quality of your life. So specifically when it comes to our intimate relationships, because obviously those are, again, I'm not going to put them in any arbitrary ranking, but your intimate relationship will ultimately determine your familial relationships as well, because whoever your intimate partner is, you're going to potentially have a family with them. So the utmost importance. And again, take this with a grain of salt. I'm just a 27-year-old guy walking this earth like the rest of you, but communicate, challenge, explore, and create. Really find out what you're seeking, and don't take any of the assumptions that naturally came to your mind at face value without exploring them. And with that being said, thank you guys for tuning in and listening. If you're listening on Spotify and Amazon Music, then go ahead and have these conversations with your friends. Have these conversations with your intimate partner. If you're a kid or not a kid, however old you are, and you're living at home with your parents, go in the middle of the night and wake them up. Slap your mom and dad in the face and say, hey, I just listened to the 206 podcast. And Armand said that you guys are just sleeping in the same bed, and you guys don't even really know if that's what's healthy and important for your relationship. Why don't you guys have a conversation about if this is what you really want to do, right? And you'll probably get kicked out of the house and sent to a mental institution. But it's all good, because you can still come back and listen to our podcast and write about your experience in the comment section, So that's it for us. Thank you guys for tuning in once again, and we'll catch you guys on the flip side.
All right, y'all. Deuces.